All right. The recording's on now. So we didn't plan anything, but last time let me try to introduce this topic. The last time we recorded on Zoom, I think we were generally talking about the dilemma that I've experienced, that I've formulated as I can't get what I want as long as I want it.
Hmm.
And the feeling of being chronically blocked all my life as far as big things are concerned, like jobs and money and um, in this case, living in Turkey permanently and things like that. And I don't remember the details of what we talked about now. It's been a week or two, uh, I think, since we did that recording. And in the meantime, we have both watched uh, episodes 10 and 11, I believe. I've actually watched 9 through 12 or 13, and I've watched 10 and 11 twice now. And it is loaded with a lot of interesting and helpful and valuable material. And even though I've watched it twice now, uh, I probably would have a hard time summarizing it all because there's just so much content there. So I'm probably just going to hit some of the things that have stuck for me. And oh, by the way, didn't we watch? I don't remember whether we had watched that um, discussion between Daniel Schmachtenberger, Ian McGilchrist, and Vervaeke in England somewhere
Yes.
before we talked about before we did the last recording. Had we, or has it been
No.
since then?
Since then.
So there's three uh, really impactful uh, videos that we've both watched since then. And the first one, Schmachtenberger, McGilchrist, and Vervaeke, was about 2.5, 3 hours long. It was really a long one and covered a lot of ground. But
Hmm.
and uh, we were already familiar somewhat with Vervaeke's work. By the way, I have, as of yesterday, I have finally finished the whole Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. I stopped short about 2 videos last year sometime for reasons that may or may not have been valid, having to do with Vervaeke's uh, video on artificial intelligence that sort of turned me off at the time. But since you got me back into his stuff, I, I went ahead and finished the last 2 videos. I'm just mentioning this in passing, where he talked about Heidegger, um, Jung, um, Owen Barfield. He only spent about 20 or 30 minutes at the end on Barfield, and we're both familiar with Owen Barfield, and I didn't feel like he gave Barfield enough time or able to do him justice. But and Paul Tillich, the famous Christian theologian Paul Tillich. He talked about those 4 people in dialogue with them about the meaning crisis. Those were the last videos in the series. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about that because you haven't you haven't seen those. Oh, and another thing I want to may bring in that I don't think you've seen is a while back, I think before I listened to any of those three videos, I ran into a video on something called paradoxical intention. And it is something that was formulated by Viktor Frankl, who was a German psychiatrist, probably Jewish, who ended up in concentration camps during World War II and was able to survive the concentration camps physically, and and he had psychological strategies for how he was surviving it psychologically, and actually able to help some of the other inmates in the concentration camp. And then I think after the war, he formulated a type of therapy called logotherapy, and it I've read one of his little books before, but this is one technique that is part of logotherapy, and there's some videos out there on it, and I've listened to several of them. I think it's pertinent to, for me anyway, it's pertinent to this question of why am I blocked and failing to basically get what I want when it comes to major things. And paradoxical intention is basically, you could call it reverse psychology. And if you want something very strongly, according to the explanation I received, it produces a counter pressure, and that makes sense to me metaphysically, in terms of traditional metaphysics, because the universe is always balanced at all times. So an intention in one direction is opposed by an energy that opposes it, that tries to block it, and you get into double binds, and you so paradoxical intention is a way of cutting through that. For instance, the more you, if you have, I've thankfully never really suffered from this, but one example is if someone's suffering from insomnia, the worst thing that they can do is try hard to go to sleep, because that's almost guaranteed to fail. So paradoxical intention would be, okay, I want to stay up. I don't want to sleep. I've got to stay up all night. And you actually fight sleep, and you end up succumbing to it.
Yeah. 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 Or you say, okay, I don't want to sleep, so why am I laying in the bed? So you
Right.
actually get up and read.
Right.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, let me thank you for that. Yes, John Vervaeke's stuff is packed. Packed. There's now, I don't know that I have enough days in my lifetime left to listen to it enough times to absorb everything he's saying. I do think that key to this question is a key answer may be found in his episode on Buddhism and parasitic processing.
All right. I haven't finished that one again yet. I listened to it one time, but I haven't finished re-listening to it. What do you remember from it?
What I remember distinctly is, first of all, and we could talk about this another time because I know that you've studied Buddhism many years. You and I have both had many conversations on the understanding of the reality of suffering, or dukkha, and what that means. And John Vervaeke goes into great detail to explain from his perspective in cognitive science that dukkha, or that we suffer from a loss of agency.
Okay.
We're stuck.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So that's the first thing he goes into great explanation about dukkha being a form of loss of freedom and agency.
All right.
And we suffer from that. He later brings in the concept developed by a neuroscientist, perhaps neuropsychiatrist. The guy's last name is Bailey, maybe Stephen Bailey. I've read, due to being exposed by Vervaeke to his work, Bailey's work on addiction, Vervaeke speaks very distinctly in this episode about an emerging model for addiction. And he basically says all of the old thinking about it is wrong. And the concept of reciprocal narrowing, think of being stuck, think of loss of agency, and the concept then Stephen, or let's just say Dr. Bailey's concept of reciprocal narrowing. Now, I've read what is available as a free sample of Bailey's, one of Bailey's works. Renee and I listened to him at one point before even being exposed to him by Vervaeke. He's really quite good. But the idea of reciprocal narrowing is, and then Vervaeke does a great job tying it back to cognitive science, is that our brains were designed, and that in a reciprocal narrowing situation, and perhaps by inference, at least in my mind, being blocked is simply a function of a natural function of the way our brain operates, right? So that we're in a situation, we perceive a threat. Our brain has to focus, and I'm certainly paraphrasing, I am not explaining it to the degree Vervaeke does. Our brain focuses, and we have under threat, we have very limited choices or possibilities, which is not a bad thing. It's narrowing down our response. But he also says that same process in a reciprocal narrowing standpoint, it becomes adaptive. In other words, maybe the right, he didn't say this, maybe the right brain comes in and introduces, well, maybe this is a possibility, maybe that's not happening. Well, that process going on cognitively readapts to the threat. No, there's a threat. No, there's a threat. There's a threat. Well, maybe no, there's a threat. So that what happens is you then have very few or very limited choices due to this process of reciprocal narrowing. Now, I can relate to that from being addicted to alcohol. Within the addiction, my brain over and over told me, I don't really have any choice over this. I want to drink. I have to drink. Okay. Let me back up and talk to you about why Bailey and Vervaeke think that all of the old viewpoints on addiction are wrong. The standard viewpoint is that simply what you have to do is take the chemical or substances, abstain from it for a period of time to break the addiction. Okay, makes sense.
That's the old paradigm.
The old paradigm makes sense. Take the alcohol out. Just you got to stop. But it doesn't really add up when it comes to addictive processes, like maybe gambling. And then the people who hold to this model will say, well, they get an endorphin release. So they're addicted to the endorphin release. But Vervaeke said what really blows it out of the water is that you had heroin addicts who were in Vietnam addicted to heroin. When they came home, spontaneously their addiction went away. And he explains it as a result of a change in the agent and the arena relationship. There was no longer this process of reciprocal narrowing going on. I'm in Vietnam. I'm in a foxhole. I'm constantly under threat. I have limited choices. I'm going to shoot up. Now I come home. I'm now a civilian. I'm going to get a job. I'm in a different situation. Possibilities have opened up to me. Okay. That's the way I understand it. But he says reciprocal narrowing, I think he related to spiraling down, limited choices. Okay. Let's think about now why we're blocked in certain situations. I'm blocked. I can't get what I want. That's the only possibility. He said, what's the way out of that? Then he refers us back to, I think, Plato, and I'm going to get the word wrong. He said, the way out, spiral up, anagogo, insight. There are other possibilities. Now, I want to back up and say that's all great from a mental standpoint, but let's take a situation right now. Why there are things that I could want, but I'm not going to get. Okay. Let me try to give a good example. I want, I don't know. It used to be that I wanted a high-end exotic car. Do I want that now? No. MG is bringing out a new cyber electric roadster. China's making it. It's going to be about 50,000 pounds. I would like one of those. I'm not going to get it. You know why? The conditions aren't right for it. I'm retired. I'm not going to take on that kind of debt. I don't want to take on that kind of debt. So I guess I really don't want it. So when it comes to being blocked, the other things I've heard about it from my perspective are, do you really want what you're saying you want? Or is there some other, maybe, is it possible that in our cognitive function, there are some things that we're not aware of that are causing this reciprocal narrowing that Vervaeke talks about? Like, for example, after being retired, feeling like I wanted to go back to work some, but I really didn't. So it wasn't working out, so part of me didn't want to go back to work and part of me did. So, and then how does that manifest? Well, I wasn't going back to work. I really appreciate what you said about the universe, the polarization, because some of the things you related to me in our what I've heard from people who teach manifestation of late is they'll say, if you want something to manifest it, know what you want. Are you sure you want it? Then you start to work for it. But know this. Then they'll say it this way. I like the way you said it better, and I had already thought about it. They'll say, but you're going to come across obstacles. There's going to be opposition. And there is opposition just because that's the way the universe is. There's no forward progress without this struggle, right? So I've said a lot. Remember, don't trust me and my explanations. This is my perspective. Don't trust my ability to relate John Vervaeke's thought on cognitive processes and relating it to Buddhism. But look closely.
We're just talking here, so it doesn't, whether you get it accurate or not is not it's not really that important.
Yeah.
Let me let me say something that that's on the fairly on the front burner, because I just listened to it today, recently, within the last few hours, on Vervaeke's episode 11. He says one way to, and I'm in the same boat as you, because I can't I can't master what he says just in a few hours of listening. But I may not get this exactly right, but the invariance heuristic. That is to say, if you vary your what you do a lot, if you throw a lot of variations in, it helps you to detect what is invariant in the situation. He says
Yes.
there's two types of invariance. There's the good invariance, which helps you, according to his metaphysics anyway, to he's assuming that which is invariant is more real. So according to his way of looking at it, if you find a good invariant, that's an indication of what's more real in the situation. That doesn't
Yes.
that doesn't seem to quite work with Buddhist Mahayana teachings, but I'll leave that on the side. But the bad invariants are like, for instance, exactly what he says is, that 9-dot problem that he shows.
Yes.
Connect
Yeah.
all 9 dots with 4 straight lines without lifting the pen. And most people can't do it. They fail at it because of two things that they're assuming. First, unconsciously, they frame it as a square.
Yes.
You can't go outside the square. And they formulate it as a connect the dots problem. And in order to solve it by the solution that he shows, you have to twice go outside the square and make a non-dot turn that allows you to solve the problem. So those are two.
Yes.
Those are two bad invariants, according to him, that you're unconsciously assuming. And so you have to de-automatize your consciousness, he says. And there are
Yes.
there are different ways to do that he explains, but one of them is to introduce a lot of disruption or noise into the system, and
Yes.
which is really revolutionary in a way of thinking, because that wouldn't normally be what you would intuit, but actually mind wandering and introducing a little bit of chaos into the system has the strong possibility of breaking a bad framing that's been preventing you from solving the problem.
Yes. Do you remember the list of disruptors that he spoke about? I think it's important. And I don't think we give enough credit to some of this.
Do you remember them? Go for it.
Well, psychedelics, drumming, dancing, music, trance states, spiritual paths,
mindfulness meditation.
Mindfulness. I mean, a spiritual path, you think about what a monk goes through, like Mooney, or what Michael went through. Talk about a life disruptor.
Well, you know what I thought about the fact that I didn't plan it this way, and I didn't even reflect on this until Vervaeke brought it up. But look how I've been hopping between different countries,
yes,
and different
travel.
cultures. that the first time I came to Turkey was a major disruption that threw me into culture
Absolutely.
shock for 6 or 8 months, and I couldn't assume some of the basic things of daily life that I had never thought to question. That really de-automatized my consciousness.
Correct. And that is another listed, I think, disruptor, no doubt about it. And that's interesting because there's another viewpoint, but I think we can take the middle way on this. I do think my cultural disruption was brought about through a number of things. And yes, leaving a country, hey, leaving the city you were born in, just leaving the city. I mean, Columbia to Charleston for Renee. Let's take the South to California. Yes. I don't know if you remember, but Emerson's famous quote, and I latched onto this in college, traveling is the paradise of fools.
What does he mean by that?
And in AA, what he means is if you're saying, hey, I'm going to go to Europe. Hey, I'm going to go here. Hey, I'm going to go there. Everywhere you go, there you are. Right? So it can invoke deep disruptive work, but if you're running from something, that's the far, what would Jessica call that in her sermon, I want to call it a sermon. That's the other extreme. And in Alcoholics Anonymous in the 12 Step programs, we say they talk about the geographical solution. Hey, if I just leave this area and go somewhere else, I won't drink anymore. Yeah. Now that kind of flies in the face of Vervaeke's and Bailey's argument about changing the arena.
It might really work. It might work sometimes. And
it just might work, especially if you were to get into. But to me, it's more about grabbing onto something else that gives you meaning. Mm-hmm. That's salient to you. It's more salient than getting drunk or getting high, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And ultimately, that's what AA and abstaining, that's what it does do. And we can see that and talk about it and anyway. But the invariance theory, I really latched onto that too. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought that was very, very important. So back to why we're blocked, then, I mean, a disruptor is to let go of a process you're in the middle of when you're trying to get something done and it's not working.
Okay, Tom, let me, can I say something before I'm pulling something important here. And if I don't do it now, why does I think we talked about this the first time. I'm not sure, but it was on my mind. Why does it, first I'm going to pose the question and then I'm going to reply to the question. Why does it seem that in my experience, I don't get the insight that allows me to solve the problem until I give up? Because it's happened clearly twice in the last month. And I think it has to do with disrupting the bad framing.
Yes. So I will give you my perspective on it. And you've asked me why for you it doesn't happen until then. And know that I'm not an expert on you, right? I can give you my perspective.
Okay.
I think it happens because of the dominance of left brain functioning and activity. And that giving up, and even probably there's probably, what I would speculate is there's an insight or something that the right brain is just breaking through a little bit right there and saying, hey, let this go. Hey, hey, left brain, settle down here. There's another way.
Tom,
that's what I think.
Tom, when I was when I was working as a programmer, um, there've been quite a few instances where I was trying to solve a problem in a program, debug a problem, fix a problem, and I was sure I was going to solve it in the next 5 minutes for up to 16 hours a day sometimes. And when I became exhausted finally and gave up and went home, this has occurred too many times this way for it to not be significant. I would wake up in the middle of the night, sit bolt upright in bed and say, damn, I know what's wrong. And I would log on from home and fix the problem in 5 minutes. Because
Yeah.
I couldn't form, I saw the pattern, but I still didn't want to give up. And I said, to be a good programmer, you have to have this dogged stubbornness where you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. But in reality, it was counterproductive after a certain point. But I still didn't want to. Acknowledge it. I still wanted to solve the problem without having to go through that. And
Correct.
it has in my when I introspect now, and I can connect it back to paradoxical intention, because as I remember in the video on Frankel's technique, he diagnosed when you get stuck, and you just can't solve the problem, it's due to hyper focus and hyper intention, according to him. Hyper focus and hyper intention. And I know I have that laser hyper narrow focus. And so
Yes.
it has to be opened up. And so paradoxical intention specifically counteracts that hyper focus, because it says, okay, I don't want that anymore. I want the opposite. Okay.
Yeah.
And that breaks the hyper focus. And I would say it breaks the bad framing.
Yes. Do you know, occurred to me, we know what we know what parabolic intention is. So that's a technique. We know what Vervaeke refers to as these disruptors that will help invoke insight. And perhaps, did I use the right word? Anagagio? Anagagio?
Anagage.
Anagage. Is that a Platonic term?
Yeah. Yeah. The anagage is the ascent to truth, not ASSENT, ASENT, rising up to truth, the ascent to truth. Is that not what you want?
Okay, hold on.
Is that not what you wanted?
Yeah. No, that is it. That's the word. And it's an ascent to truth. So it's So we know what Vervaeke's disruptors are. Do we know, it occurred to me to ask, I'm sure McGilchrist somewhere advocates certain practices. Oh, by the way, back to Vervaeke's disruptors, sacrament and ritual also disruptors.
Okay.
But anyway, do we know that anything what recommendations McGilchrist has to facilitate, develop, bring right brain more to the prominence and readjust so that the right brain is master, left brain is emissary? I probably read it.
I don't remember that, and I haven't read his book. I've only I've only listened to watched videos, so I'm not really as knowledgeable about his thought as I am about Vervaeke. There's probably something in that long discussion, but I just don't remember it right now.
Okay. All right. Okay. You mentioned mindfulness. Vervaeke talks about pure consciousness events and then at-one-ment. I think
Let me
that might be.
in case somebody should listen to this video in the future
Yeah.
and want to know what we're talking about, let me give a little bit of synopsis, rough synopsis of what that means,
Mhm.
if I can. Um, I know it, but it takes Vervaeke a long time to to actually explain this. So there's two axes. There's your attention can do what he calls a transparency to opacity shift and an opacity to transparency shift. Transparency to opacity shift is when I step back, and he gives a practical demonstration where he says take something, a pencil or something that he
Yep.
calls a probe, and a cup, and then close your eyes and start tapping on the cup and tap
Yes.
all around, trying to get a sense of what this object is. And now step back and become aware of the movement of your probe tapping,
Hmm.
and then step back from that and become aware of your fingers, and step back
Hmm.
from that and become aware of your hand, and step back from that and try to become aware of the sensations in your hand. So you're doing what he's called a transparency to opacity shift, and then you can go the opposite direction, and you can go
Correct.
back from
Yes.
there to back to the cup through those steps. And then the other axis is
And by the way, could I interject there? And he equates that process with vipassana. Vipassana, correct?
Vipassana.
Vipassana. Oh
Vipassana.
Lord. All right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And let's see, the other one, what is the other axis now, Tom? Help me
It's
out.
it's it is it's going it is an upward axis and it corresponds with metta, but it is upward in at-one-ment. Now, I don't know if he made as clear an example as you just talked about with the cup. I don't remember. He may have,
He
but for
didn't.
him, the upward and the at-one-ment, that is that mystical experience of the oneness with everything.
Well, actually, what I remember is he has two axes: the transparency
Yes.
to opacity, and opacity to transparency is the forgive me, my mathematics, the x or the y axis. I forget
Yep.
which is which now. And then uh, the other one is um, breaking frame, or is that right? Break. Oh, I know. It's um, it's going towards the center. I can't remember now.
Yeah.
But and then basically, sorry, I can't remember that clear. But then he draws a diagonal line and he says, now we tend to go in this direction and do both of these things at the same time. And he calls that scaling down towards what he calls the pure consciousness event, which is
Yeah.
breaking up your experience atomistically, and it's very typical of the way Vipassana meditation is taught in Buddhism, and it is very typical, for instance, of the way Eckhart Tolle and people like that are saying, drop your thinking and come into the present moment, and
Yes.
you're going back, uh, uh, abstract. I don't want to use that word; it's loaded. Um, you're um, you're going towards the center of your mind. You're stepping back,
Yep.
until there's no object. There's only pure consciousness,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
that's called the pure.
I did not.
And that's called the pure consciousness event.
Correct. I didn't understand it. I understood pure consciousness event as to be one movement, the transparency to opacity shift, although I didn't remember that till you explained it. And then the other axis is up, and I understand that to be the movement towards at one-ment. And those as being two distinct, but I do remember very significantly he said too much of one and only one and not the other, not good. And vice versa. You
Okay.
need both. And maybe I don't remember that diagonal line.
Yeah, I
and maybe
do.
that's what you're talking about. That's we need to be on that.
I have a clear memory of that. There's that horizontal line, transparency to opacity, opacity to transparency. Then there's an up and down, there's another line that makes a cross. And then when he talks about the at one-ment, it's in this direction. It's diagonal.
Huh. Yeah, I did not understand that at all. I'll have to go back and look at it because I didn't understand the at one-ment. So are you saying that in your understanding of his video, the at one-ment is a combination of both movements?
Yeah. The at one-ment is a combination of, it would be opacity to transparency shift, and then whatever that other axis is, it would be moving a combination of both of those which would produce a diagonal line. And scaling down is likewise a combination of the two on the other end, going down towards the pure consciousness event.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that again. But you do agree that he then relates that the two separate movements, he relates it in his Buddhist practice to Vipassana and Metta.
Yes.
The combination of those two.
Yes.
All right.
And Vervaeke, as I understand it, Vervaeke is defining enlightenment as a systematic insight that allows the mind to flow. That's important, because he's got this continuity hypothesis from insight to the flow state, through mystical experience and transformative experience, and it is a dynamical, self-organizing system that's flowing constantly, but along this diagonal line, trying to get what he calls an optimal grip on the world.
Yes.
And it's moving and dynamic all the time.
Got it. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'll have to.
and he sums it up by saying, uh, to see the world, the at one, in a grain of sand,
Yeah,
to be able to optimize so that you grasp both the details and the big picture simultaneously, and that's what he calls the non-dual state.
yeah, yeah. That William Blake, see the world in a grain of sand, non-dual state. So yeah. Hmm.
You know what?
What?
I'm going to